Wow, fantastic. I think I've actually done this in the right sequence now. So hello to the Silver Tent, and for those of you who are watching the recording, hello from Silver Tent TV. I am so excited to welcome Vanessa Squire Kaliski to this interview. I've been longing to chat with her in a more public arena, not just over a kitchen table with a large glass of wine and a beautiful pile of her fantastic food, which I'm getting incredibly used to, thank you. So I wanted to just introduce you, Vanessa, so that people get a more of an idea of why I've been champing at the bit to interview you. And you're such a good supporter. You're so good at being behind the scenes that it's really fun and inspiring to bring you out into the spotlight. So I wanted to share a little potted bio with you all who are watching now about Vanessa, because she's traveled widely as a child as well as an adult, has worked in numerous different organizations, lived in various different cultures, is multilingual, and actually amazing at multitasking in a way that just sort of confounds my brain, I tell you. It really does. And even though we're birthday twins, we both have our birthdays on the 4th of October, although different years. We are quite frequently really different. Like my Libran expression is the kind of person that swings from one state to another rather crazily sometimes. My mum used to say that I was an emotional athlete, and I don't think that was a compliment. But you, Vanessa, I see you as someone who has mastered that ability to stay at a point of balance. And I was also thinking earlier about how I think most people, as we grow up, are taught that you can either be, or that you are either an optimist or a pessimist. And whether we are naturally one or the other, or whether that comes from our upbringing, I'm not quite sure. But there's a sense that we're taught that those are the two options. You are either an optimist or you're a pessimist. But we're not taught that actually that's a perspective that says that life happens to us, that we are subject to our environment and circumstances. And what I get from you, and of course, actually, a lot of this came from a very interesting conversation with Jeanette Kishori Mackenzie, who was explaining your background as being so different from hers and mine, and probably most everybody else, really, is that you didn't get taught to be either an optimist or a pessimist. It seems that very early on, you got to understand that you could ask for and decide what you wanted from life. And that creates something so different. Like you, it seems to me that you haven't had to unlearn all that baggage in order to be able to even consider the possibility of creating your own reality. So let me hand over to you and say, can you share with us a little bit about what made your upbringing that way, how that imbued that wisdom with you, I guess?
Well, thanks for having me here. After many years of being very public and doing a lot of public big trainings and mentorings and things like that, it's been an absolute pleasure for the last dozen years or so to be in the background. And in terms of the upbringing, I never, of course, we take things for granted, the things we have, like a fish knows it's swimming in the sea. And being the last of a large family, I was literally on the shirt tails of my older siblings, who they'd done all the shocking things, and they were all very, let's say, very unique and very, very creative in everything they were doing. And I just got to kind of waltz along. and without any expectations or nobody pushed me anywhere. It was always very clear that it was my decision. And as you say, it actually made a unique, and also knowing, it's a knowing, or right from early childhood, that I'm the boss. And that and it does remind me that one of my sisters had a Hungarian pen friend who in the 60s used to come and visit. And she called me a kleine Hexe, which is a little witch. I was probably about 5 at the time, and I must have been really tedious for them. But it's because of that way that I had of just knowing. And here I am now, having the perfect, shall we say, living on purpose, which we're encouraged to do by Jeanette Kishori Mackenzie, the way of having had the last 4 or 5 years hands-on, shall we say, living right next to her and being able to enjoy the games as the ideal playmate, honestly. It's crystallized so much of the background that I have and the ways that I have. And also, I'll never forget, for instance, that one afternoon we went for a drive by the beautiful Instow in North Devon. And she suddenly said, you know, we're not yet born. And I thought, wow, that's so true. And it is so true. It means that every day we get the opportunity to do things our way. And that is exactly what I'm all about. That it's doing what we really want every day. So yeah, that's my background in that. And I feel that I'm just floating along, you know, talking about the Libran fulcrum. I really have always been aware of that, of knowing that I can see the point of balance and feel it. It's the clunk click. And I see that in every situation.
Wow. So. It is amazing spending time with you, Vanessa, because you have that ease. You know, I get overwhelmed and you just seem to thrive the more that is asked of you. And I wonder, because I love the visuals that get conjured up when you share a bit about the traveling and the schools that you attended and the different things that you did as a child and then as a young woman. Would you share a little bit about that? Because it really shows your ability to be flexible. So even though you're the boss, there is that flexibility as well, which I think is vitally important.
Yes, I was certainly introduced, shall we say, to being flexible and adaptable from a very, very early age. Also, I'm sure that being multilingual is part of that. I was brought up bilingual with French, and my first school was in French, was a French speaking primary school in Belgium, and then moved to different schools as we moved house. And I do remember my dad saying to me one day, you know, every place you go, this is by the time I'm moving to about the 4th or 5th school, he said, you know, every place you go, you'll see the same half dozen types of people. So just amuse yourself identifying them. And he's so right. Now, of course, I've developed more and I know that there is no other and that it's all us and it's all a reflection of us. And of course, we're all creating these experiences of the different others, as it were. And so I grew up in Belgium and France and then went to boarding school in England. Those of us who've been through boarding school experiences will know how resilient that makes you. I was always being addressed as aloof because I would stand and observe. But I never saw aloof I never took it on as of course it was like an accusation. But I always saw that as, well, that's what, you know, that's what it is. And then when I was 10, we moved back to Belgium, and I was from Paris, and I was thinking to go to the same Belgian school that I had been at as a primary school. And I saw that they did tedious homework, and the structure of it was very rigid. And after 4 days, I just walked out. And I remember walking home. I was 10. I remember walking home, and I said to my mum, that's it, I'm not going back there. You know, it's too tedious. And I hats off to her. She never freaked or anything. About a week later, she said to me, oh, you know, you're going to have to go to some kind of school. So she said, oh, and there's a new school starting up in Brussels, the British School of Brussels. And it's really, it's fun. They call the teachers by their first names. It's actually it was at the beginning time of the European Union. And they actually held this school started in the Saint-Continel in the middle of Brussels. And we used to play in the park, and it was very free and easy, and very much the beginning of the so-called open schools. And then we moved to the permanent premises, and Prince Philip came to open the school, and my photo was on the front of the Paris Match, shaking his hand. And there's all sorts of weird experiences like this, and you do wonder why. But it was a very good pioneering spirit, shall we say, influence. Then I went to the boarding school, and then and when I was 14, there, you see, having already succeeded once, when I was 14, I said to my parents, I've had enough of this. And so my dad took early retirement, and we moved back from Belgium to the UK, to England, to Cornwall. And I found myself moving from one of the top public schools to a Cornish grammar school, which was worlds apart, but also fascinating. And everywhere I went, it was just so fascinating to see the differences and the changes. And I never got the hockey game, for instance, having come from lacrosse. But, you know, things like that just taught me to be adaptable and resilient. Yeah, and then I moved to Israel when I was 20. And there again, it was but that's because my father had encouraged us all the years, and it just got under my skin. And I was looking for roots by that time, having moved around so much. I was looking for somewhere that felt rooted, and there was a very, very strong feeling of being rooted on the shores of the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River, and in the first kibbutz, which is obviously significant because I was always looking for community and rootedness, and I certainly got it in spades there. And it gave me the opportunity, which was something I'd decided probably, I don't remember if I was 8 or a little bit older, having decided I wanted 4 children. So that was simple on the kibbutz. Yeah, and again, that was a new language. So, and a very rooted language with a lot of history and a lot of roots. And that way I just developed onwards from a lot of being adaptable and being multilingual, and then doing international marketing meant I was traveling all over the world. And I found myself in every situation. I found myself in leadership positions. Even at school, I was head girl. I was on the kibbutz. I was on all the committees. I always found myself drifted into leadership positions without pushing. It happens organically. It comes from inside. Mm. So it's a very, shall we say, steady it feels like a very steady way forward, and very exciting, because it means constantly challenging. I don't have a chip of boredom or anything like that, because there's always fascinating stuff to play with.
I'm just so taken. I can just see you at the age of 10 and then at the age of 14 going, no, I've had enough of this. This is a bit tedious. And the way that your parents didn't go, don't be ridiculous.
Exactly. It's just kind of, okay.
I mean, how amazing, how absolutely amazing to be so certain in yourself, you know, that you made the decision and then your parents followed suit. And I quite get this sense of why you would be in leadership roles or organically, because you're not pushy. You're just there. Actually, that's not quite right either. But you know, you're amazing. It's like it's really interesting to find that I'm quite short of words now. It's like, wow, that doesn't happen very often. But you know, what I love is the support that you give, and but I think that leadership role is really interesting, because you are a supporter, but from a perspective of leadership. There's no sense of subservience for a start, right?
No,
that's not in there at all.
Don't have that chip.
Yeah, but your support is also without question, and that's really exciting. And I love the way that, for me, you'll push me. It's like, what about writing this book? What about writing that book? And it's like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that yet. Okay, yeah, I'll write that. Thank you. And I've written it, and then you publish it, and it's like, wow, things just happen with you. And I remember quite a few years ago, I said to you, do you ever procrastinate? It's like, do you
yes.
do that? And you said, well, no. And you made a decision when your older sister died, I think.
Ah, yes, absolutely. My sister Rosalind died when I was 16, and she was a powerhouse, or is a powerhouse. And that absolutely gave me the clear knowledge, of course, about the understanding about death, that nobody's gone anywhere or lost, or any of those silly things that we say, knowing that she's all the time with us. And also the way she lived her life, the things she managed to do by the age of 30 was just amazing. And it was almost like, you know, when you pull a string and something sets off, like you have to, like, it's almost like she pulls a string, and there's no going back. You know, you're on track. That's the way you do it. So yes, so I know that that's very much a drive, and it's not a drive from being pushed. It's literally a momentum, and of getting things done and doing things. And I've had to live my life like that as well. Like, even when I got to the stage when I realized my marriage wasn't serving me, and I felt a strong drive that there was more. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and realized there's got to be more to this. And lo and behold, within a very short time, I found myself having left the kibbutz, left Israel, left my marriage, left my 4 children, and back in England, and reconnected with my first boyfriend, and who was a tremendous influence on my life. And then we had who became my husband, and we had another 8 years together before he died at the end of 2020. And he was somebody who had done a lot of hands-on research into everything that I had somehow absorbed by default. And that's the amazing thing. It's that being that momentum, that feeling of having that string pulled and that momentum, and finding, and I mean, also I'm in the same situation with Jeanette now, that she's got that tremendous wide knowledge and I get to absorb it, you know. Again, I don't know if it's being inherently lazy, but I don't think so.
I don't get the impression that they were lazy
It's just a question of being open to absorb. Now that's where I'm talking about lifting the lid, and love lifting the lid, because I love everything I do and I'm open to being in the heart field and living on purpose, and lifting the lid in that I don't take anything ever for granted. And I just lift the lid and look at it and allow my inner clunk click, my inner litmus to check everything out and question. And that way I feel sometimes, like when you turn the light switch on in a room and there's light, then it's a dramatic change. Sometimes it's a ripple effect, like you have a small ripple and it ripples out. But everything that we experience, everything from every direction and like the things that we have around us must be questioned. That is our legacy, to know to question. And if there's anything I do in this interview today, it's to encourage everybody to just take an extra moment to, hand on heart, just think or feel, more like it, feel. It's more feeling than thinking.
And you do that so beautifully around people. Like I know that there are many times when I've been sitting in your kitchen and I've got lost in a story of mine, you know, and it's like, oh, this is how it is. And you'll just very quietly just ask me that, like, is that true? Like, is that really how it is? What about something different? What about, you know, and it's like all that questioning, or not all that questioning, but that kind of questioning, like always bringing me back to who's the director here? Who's the director? And, you know, what's so clear is your level of self-direction. Your level of self-direction. I mean, very, very clearly. And I have always had that sense of you that you don't run away from things, that you move towards what you prefer. And I remember being told by an amazing guy I was training with at the time, and he said, you know, never run away from what you don't want. He said, it's pointless. He said, move towards what you'd love. And you very clearly do that energetically. You can feel the difference, can't you, when somebody's just going, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that, as opposed to, I want this, I'd love this, I'd love that. And, you know, you do that really effectively with so many people. And something that you said, a couple of things that you said earlier that I wanted to approach about lifting the lid on, actually, is the concept of death. So you mentioned it around your sister Rosalind, and I'm wondering what gave you, can you remember what gave you that understanding that death isn't loss, isn't a loss? Do you know how you came to that conclusion?
I do remember that I was 16 and feeling, I remember I fainted when, physically fainted, when they told us in the hospital that she was dying. Now, 2 days after they just removed her 26-week baby, and who today is a 6'3" father of 3. And the shock of it, the deep shock, was almost like a kickstart. And it kickstarted in me just a knowledge that nobody goes anywhere. It's like a pop through a membrane to a wider experience. And then I get this hands-on more recent experience with my husband Ian, that he was excited to be moving to a wider dimension. And I know that he's done that. I feel him with me all the time. And I know that he's done that because we're playing. It's a game. The whole thing is a game. And life is a game. And this whole experiment or game it's just like, remember in the playground how we used to play with the elastic jumping up and down, like that French skipping or whatever it was called. And we always tried a different way to make a different angle, or hopscotch, doing different squares. It's just like that. It's literally a game. So we just have to be open to play it and allow it. It's all about allowing it. And I knew that from such a young age. And I remember it was very significant that it was just a few weeks after Rosalind died that I met Ian for the first time. So he was such an important influence on my life because he knew as well. And the fact that we somehow, in this amazing way, like we went to Israel together when I was 20. Then we went our separate ways and I decided to stay in Israel. And we both married kibbutzniks and became members of different kibbutzim. Then I lost track and touch of him from 1987-ish until 2012. And then we reconnected and I had to decide again to go by that time it was the other way round. He was the exotic and my life in Israel was the tried and trusted. And I just decided to jump off the cliff and go for it. And I decided, yes, to go with him and see where this adventure was going to take me. And I still don't know the end of that adventure because, we don't, until we look back, we can't join the dots. I still can't see the entire picture. I know it's forming. And I did start writing a book in 2012 called Rooting for Yourself after I saw an enormous eucalyptus tree blow over in the kibbutz on the bank of the Jordan River. And the enormous eucalyptus tree had hardly any roots. Somehow it had grown so quickly and so it had blown over. So now I realized that the mycelium and the roots and our connectedness in the subconscious, and not necessarily to the naked eye, that's where the power is. And we have to be rooted like that to be able to wave our branches, because otherwise we just blow over. And so I am now about to study a bit more about mycelium, but I know that that's where it's at. There's a lot to be said for exploring and allowing the development of our knowledge through this rootedness and the mycelium. And that's what I recognized, because when we first met, it was at a time when I was promoting one of the first members of the Silver Tent who interviewed you, Kay Newton. And when I heard you talking, that was a clunk click, because that I knew that you were on track with the sort of thing I was talking about. And so it's this recognition, it's having the recognition chip, which is really crucial. And of course, it's not by chance that you've chosen an image like that for your background image on the Silver Tent as well, with the roots, and it looks like mycelium and yes, the connectedness.
Yeah.
So yeah, there we are.
Wow. There's a comment from Gwen Atkinson saying, what a great message that this is just a game, and that's really landed with her. And yeah, I agree. And I so applaud the way that you decide like what to believe, really. It's like you could have stood at 16, couldn't you, and said, oh, life is just a game and we never go anywhere, we don't get lost. And how many people would have said, oh, don't be ridiculous? You know, certainly if that had been me, I would have been that. And yet you are unwavering in that. And yet I also get that because of that flexibility, that if then something feels more right at a later date, then you'll just shift from one to another, that you don't have to be wedded to a particular perspective or belief or knowing for the rest of your life, that it's perfectly okay to flow and flow and grow.
Flow and grow. There you go. We've got a new slogan there. Absolutely. That's right. Never be blinkered, because it's being blinkered. It's being, you know what? It's being invested in some belief is never going to serve us. And always allow your knowing to come through. Lift the lid, allow that knowing to come through. That's the idea.
And I think it's really interesting, isn't it, having got that that sentence, that like that core, that theme of lifting the lid that came through. But it's kind of not surprising that since 2020, you know, there's been this shift, I think, in the number of people who question the narrative, question what we're told. And I realize that where I've got to, and it's been growing over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 decades, not as long as you. I've certainly never been as self-directed as you. It's like, oh, I try that on for size now that I've really heard you explain it and see how that feels to me. But, you know, I question so much now. I hear something from the news. I don't actually watch the news anymore, but if I hear something, it's like I'm always questioning it. I don't immediately just assume that because it's in the press or comes from a journalist or is being, you know, comes from the government or whatever, really. And I think my biggest wake-up call around that was when I was running my magazine, The Changing Times, before you and I actually met.
Yeah.
I went to see 2 films. I'd been invited to do a review on 2 films. The one by Al Gore on, oh, I'm going to forget the name of it now. But
whatever.
Anyway, yeah, but about climate change.
Yeah.
And I went to see that, and you know, and it was very, very well put together, and it was very authoritative. And I thought, wow, definitely, you know, yeah, of course, all the proof is there, absolutely. And then within, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I got invited to go and see a different documentary, which was saying exactly the opposite, exactly the opposite. And I thought, is there any value in me going to see that? And then I thought, well, I will go and see that, because I have no idea how on earth they could ever oppose the facts that Al Gore has put in his film. So, wow, yeah, of course, right? And it's like, oh, this is really interesting. I believe Al Gore, and I believe, I can't remember who did the other film. I can't remember what it's called either. I just remember the content of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I can believe that, and I can believe that, and they're completely opposing stories, opposing narratives.
Yeah.
What will I choose?
Get your litmus out.
Yeah. And I loved what you called it earlier before we actually came onto the live, when you talk about your bullshit monitor. And but you do that all the time, don't you? You just use that as an automatic part of your kind of life protocol.
Mm. Yes, I have. My life protocol includes knowing that everything always exceeds my wildest expectations. That's one thing I wake up with every day and go to sleep with every day.
Wow.
And therefore, that's a simple one, because therefore I know that it's all fine. And therefore I have the monitor, like I know I have my monitor out. And I have to say, one thing about being in the silver tent and about being over 50 is that my fuse is shorter. Like my discernment time is shorter now, and it's pretty much like that. And especially since, I don't know if probably many of us will remember in the 1960s, I think it was, that which I absolutely adored. There was a TV program about with Samantha, who twiddled her nose to get to magic stuff. So I'm absolutely channeling this Samantha idea. And I've decided I click my fingers because I have never got the nose twiddle right. So now when I'm playful to a degree. Like I play with arranging the weather how I want it. Obviously, Tinkerbell finding car parking spaces, but also many, many other things all the time. Like
I remember. Sorry.
It's just a game. It's just a game. And
I so want to butt in here, Vanessa. I'm so sorry. It goes out of my head. But I remember when I was at your place, whenever, and you were waiting for a parcel to be delivered, but we were going out. And it's like a fairly inconsequential thing, isn't it? But you just said, oh yeah, no, he'll arrive within the next half an hour or something before we go out. In fact, he's probably there right now. And you just went and opened the
literally opened the door.
Just as he was about to knock on the door.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
In a nutshell, there you go.
Honestly, I recommend everybody watching this, if you ever get the chance, to spend some time with Vanessa, because it's a complete treat. And what I love, though, is that direction with flexibility. And that to me really says it all. You don't map out a day and you go, right, I'm insisting on this, 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 and this. But you put the flavor in, don't you? It's like
well, it was quite funny because on Friday I went across the moor and met my niece, who was doing a voice development workshop in Dartmoor somewhere. And while we were chatting, she told me about a film that she'd seen. Oh, you've got to see this film. And I thought it was something I'd not really thought about. So yesterday I remembered her words around noontime, and I looked locally and I saw that film was no longer on here in Tabby, but lo and behold, the last showing of it was at 3 p.m. in Oakhampton. So of course I asked my playmate Jeanette if she wanted to come with me. Yep. So we got to see the last showing of this film. I still haven't quite figured out why or what it's all about, but it's just an example of everything appears to line up. I don't even know, it doesn't matter how complex or how simple it is. It's all quite simple, really. And it just kind of lines up.
Fantastic. We've got a couple more comments that have come through. Wonderful Steffi sends them to me.
Yeah.
There's a comment from Patricia Cherry saying, I agree about needing to be rooted in who we are. And I think what's so interesting about the friendship and work relationship that you and I are developing or have developed, is that you're really well rooted and I'm not.
Well, don't judge, my dear.
But it's a really interesting thing, perspective, and yeah, no, actually, maybe I'm not judging myself about that, but just recognizing the difference.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a very interesting learning to root myself. And then Gwen is now saying, oh, she never really knew about the background image here that you can see behind me. So the Silver Tents banner. Actually, I believe, I've got to keep remembering this, that this is an image of the Earth taken from space. But it does look exactly like that. If I move like that, that really does look like.
It looks like mycelium, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Slightly lost my train of thought now. Where were we? Oh, I know. Yeah, so we talked about lifting the lid off death. And that's one of the reasons I think that you encouraged me to write the book about Kahuna, about Kahuna, the cat who didn't die.
Yeah.
And I got that sense of Kahuna's presence because of something that Jeanette Kashuri-Mackenzie had told me. And she'd said, you're lost in the loss of your cat Kahuna. So every time that you feel that loss, choose to find his presence. And it was like I got that into, oh, I can feel him.
Clank click.
And I followed that advice. And my rational mind went, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But my heart just exploded. And it was an amazing, and is an amazing experience. So I think that's a wonderful thing to lift the lid on, isn't it? The whole
Absolutely.
and talked about death. But what other things are you exploring now in the realm of lifting the lid?
Well, shall we say my passion projects are to support passion projects. And that's why we set up a business 12 years ago, or however long it was, to support passion projects. And we've been doing project management and publishing. It started with a background in copywriting and editing, and that became, and then we started to just publish and do project management for various projects. And it has to have the kernel of being a passion project. And that's why I'm so supportive of your new dream of the vision of the Silver Legacy projects, because that's obviously where it's at. And the way that Silver Legacy projects will be expressed, it doesn't matter how we're going to express it, and there can be 101 different ways. It's the actual messages and getting them out there that's important. And that can be by speaking, it can be by books, it can be by art, it can be just sitting, chatting to your grandchildren, it can be anyhow. And what I know is that it's clear that it's a ripple effect as well. And it's something that each and every single Silver sister can be doing. Right from the tiniest beginnings until some major project or whatever. And I think the big message is as well that it doesn't matter how small it is. There's never too small. And the things that we're doing are, I see myself, I have 4 grandchildren, and I have such fun telling them about their heart stars and how they shine. And I've got that, my eldest is 3.5 now, and he's right from the earliest age, since he was about a year old, he's been nuts about Spider-Man. And knowing, and I was just, I mean, these are the kind of conversations we have. So I said to my son on Friday, I said, he does know that he's the real superhero, doesn't he? So Dan says, yeah, I tell him every day. So I thought, that is the thing. It's them absolutely getting it, that we are all superheroes. We are each our own superhero. And together we are greater superheroes than the sum of all of us is much greater than the individual. And I mean, it's also apparently not by chance that I have my 3 sons and my 4 grandchildren on the kibbutz, rooted still on that kibbutz. So whatever rooting instincts I had there, I've obviously done it in quite an extreme way.
Amazing.
And yeah, so I mean, that's the thing about every little, really does, about that silly slogan, which is so powerful, by one of our big corporates here, is that every little helps. It really does.
I absolutely love that. I completely agree. You know, when people say to me, "Oh, but I don't want to do much," it's like, it doesn't matter at all. Or whatever your heart calls you to do. We've got a question from Gwen. She says, I have such knowing around most things in my life, except what is passion. Any tips on developing knowing around that? I feel this uncertainty about the next chapter of my life. And I think this is a theme for many of us just now. What's your take on this, Vanessa?
Plug in, that's all. It's very simple, Gwen. Just plug into the heart field. As Jeanette says, everything's all already done and it's all perfect in the heart field. And anything of any hesitation or question or confusion, just hand on heart and focus in the heart field and allow it to come. And if we just, even if we do that 5 minutes before we go to sleep at night, when we first wake up in the morning, just don't try and push it. Don't strategize it. Don't get in your head. Don't get in your own way.
Wow.
Just allow it to come.
Yeah,
and it does. It really does. As you saw, I can even open the door and the delivery guy's there. That's how it is.
I love it. Just love it. Thank you. Hope that helps, Gwen. Thanks for asking the question. I'm really, really excited too at the fact that you're coming to the Silver Legacy in-person journey starting this coming Friday. Yay! I can't believe it's almost here. And this idea of like, I don't use the word rooted because I don't think about it. It's not something I particularly feel. So that's really interesting to play with that. But what's been coming through is sacred geometry for me. And I got this wonderful image. And it was so funny, like what you were saying now about how the rational mind can really make things complicated, where the heart simplifies. I was sitting here yesterday thinking, oh, I've got to work out this whole new tune-in that we're going to do that we've never done before, right? Never done before. It's completely new. My muse brought it through to me a couple of months ago or something. This idea that we're not just going to look at your legacy message, but we're going to create a group legacy project, which of course will be a passion project. And I was sitting here contemplating, like, how are we going to do that? Oh, well, I'll tune in and find out. I tuned in. It's like, oh, really? As simple as that? It's like completely obvious. I'd gone from, wow, that's sounding really complicated to, let me write this down because that sounds deceptively simple.
Yeah,
and it is deceptively simple. And
one of our biggest enemies is the word how,
isn't it? Yeah.
And we talk about unwords, and how is an unword, like hope and so many others. We've got a whole list of them, which one of these days we'll publish a book about it. But how is really not our friend, is it?
No, it's like it's a bit like a phrase that's just popped up, which is where's the money going to come from? Often the question I've asked myself, and the answer, I can't remember who said it, but it's somebody's brilliant quote, which is, from wherever it is. The money is going to come from wherever it is. We don't know.
That's what Jeanette says, that somebody in India told her that one. It was just,
that's brilliant. It's brilliant, isn't it? It just let it go. It's like, oh, okay. And then, I had a get together with some friends locally a few days ago. And, you look at the things that we call quite magical. Somebody will say, oh, I'd love this to happen in my life, but it's impossible. And then you open that up and then somehow it happens. But if you look at the how, that actually what made that work, you'd never have dreamt it up. You would never, well, that person will meet, that person will do this, will do that. It's like, you can't. So there's no point in, like you say, trying to work out the how.
It's really funny because I really have had, especially in the last year, I don't know if you've noticed, it seems to be speeding up, this thing about you can't make it up. Like, I mean, almost every day something happens or somebody comes or something, and you think, you can't make that up.
Yeah.
You know, we couldn't have imagined it. It's just amazing how things are just panning out. I mean, on every little level, you know, that can be just from the tedium of day to day to big things.
And it's just something that came into my head now was about refining the request or refining the decision. I'm contemplating opening myself up to a relationship. Oh, God, I've probably been saying that for a couple of years, but at least it's heading in the right direction. And this man turned up the other day, and we just had such a flirt together. And it's like, oh, this is really nice, and actually sounds him quite attractive. And then I could tell that was reciprocated. Right? There's absolutely no shadow of a doubt about that. And then, of course, I found out he was married, and I'm not interested in that. And I realized I hadn't refined my.
Big one, a big one. Be precise. And I think that's a training that we do. And I think that you're just exactly referring to the typical training on that. It's sometimes until you look back and join the dots, you can't see, that came just to show me I have to be even more precise.
Yes, there's a great example of that when I absolutely got it wrong. But the idea was right.
There is no right or wrong, there are no mistakes, remember?
Well, first time that I went and did ayahuasca, and I knew that one of the things that happens is you purge. And I just really didn't want to be sick. And the shaman there said, you know, be aware of what you ask for because you'll receive it. So in my head, what I really wanted, what I actually wanted, was a wonderful experience without the purging. But what I said, the words were, I don't want to be sick. So I wasn't, but I felt nauseous for an entire night. It was a horrible, horrible experience. And the following day I thought, no, that wasn't the right request. It wasn't the wording. That wasn't, I know what I meant, but I asked for something that it was off, you know?
Yes, yeah.
Like, wow, you just go for that. And Gwen, I'm wondering actually if that's something that you haven't refined your request quite to find that clarity.
I remember as a child, I used to love Aladdin and his magic lamp and how he polished his lamp. And I remember that so fascinated me, that whole thing about getting your, and I suppose that was my training as a small child.
Aladdin.
Of wording, yes, finding how to formulate your requests, what you want exactly. And that's how I played as a child. That was my game, you know, getting it right, getting it clear.
Yes, clear as opposed to right. Yes.
Clear, getting it clear, precise, being on point. It's really, really crucial. And
brilliant. I'm sorry, I've just got a comment from Kishori. It was
right.
Harishi Mahesh Yogi wanted to cover the temple with gold. His disciples asked, where would the money come from? He laughed and said, money comes from where it is. Thank you, Kishori. Thank you.
There you go. Got the story.
It will come from wherever it is. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
It really will. Oh, it does. We know it is anyway. So yeah.
So what are you creating next? Do you have like a specific or yeah?
I was amazed recently. I've just been on holiday in Tavira in Portugal and was quite amazed to find myself on the flight home making a list for the first time in a long time of things that I'm fascinated to see come to fruition. So one of those for sure is to get my Rooting for Yourself book finished. That's for sure. But I also have other projects bubbling up, which I will share in due course. And it's of course ahead of this legacy retreat, knowing that the drive, let's call it a drive, is to share these messages, mine and as a group, with as many as we possibly can. And so I find myself jabbering away to virtually everybody next to me about the silver tent and about legacy and about it being multi-generational, and it's for all ages. And I know also, this is a bit of a lifting the lid thing, that it's clearly linked with those who've unzipped their cat suits and human suits. And I know that this is linked with those who are in a wider dimension. And it's plugging into that as well. And it's something to do with multi-dimensional, multi-generational. This is a much wider game than just this little playground where we are here. And I'm open to that. That's what I'm lifting the lid on. That's why I love lifting the lid.
Oh, that's so cool, Vanessa. It has become clear for me over the last week or so, this vaster game that we're playing in, or this vaster field that we're exploring. And it reminds me, years and years ago, something like 20 years ago, I was on a course out in America, and we were asked to write down, what did we want to happen in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years? And it's like, whoa, what? And I can't remember where it was that I put it. But I mean, it really makes you think, like, how do you answer that question? What would I like in 150 or 500 years? How do you do that? And so I wrote down, I want to be an intergalactic ambassador. And it was like, yeah, that's a bit of a laugh, you know. But I can sort of sense that interdimensional, intergalactic kind of ambassadorship. And I hadn't thought of that for a while. And it's like,
yeah, that feels right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. And yeah, so we're just coming up to the hour. So last thoughts of takeaways that people can receive from today's interview with you. What can they do immediately after they've watched this that will be of service to them? And yeah.
Plug into the knowing and relief that there are no mistakes. There's no right or wrong. And every tiniest ripple is of value because it will ripple out. And 101 more ideas bubble into my head, but I know just to keep it simple. And that's another very strong thing that comes to me. Keep it simple.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful. And there feels like there's one more question that follows on from that, maybe particularly for those who feel that their ripple is little.
A little ripple.
Is, I guess, words of encouragement that little ripples have value.
I think everybody who's sat by any waterway at any time, to see the tide go in and out, to see the ripples, to see the flow. Flow is where it's at, and it's plugging into the flow and allowing the flow that's crucial. So every ripple will lead to a flow, and that's what's essential, is to allow the flow.
Oh, that's just gorgeous. And how wonderful to have encouragement when we think our ripples are little or inconsequential comes with that, doesn't it? That's the judgment that comes, is the ripple is too little to be of consequence. And what you're saying and how I feel as well is that's untrue.
It all leads to a flow.
Yeah, fantastic.
So allow, open it up and allow.
And we've mentioned, Jeanette Kishore Mackenzie several times throughout the interview. Let's put some links. We will put some links in the information for anybody interested in getting in touch with Jeanette, because her work is just
Her play. Let's have a,
Her play.
let's be precise.
She does play with universal energy, and like, I don't even know how to describe really. So we'll put some links in there to Jeanette, and also I think to Silver Legacy.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
I encourage everybody to be involved in Silver Legacy, because all of us Silver Sisters are absolutely here for that. And I so tune into what you're saying, Francesca, about the legacy being where it's at. It's
Yes.
legacy for us, it's legacy for everybody, and it's really legacy time.
It is, isn't it? And I love this evolution of it, going from an individual's legacy.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Let's reveal the individual's legacy and that legacy message, but then let's weave our wisdom.
Take the lid off and allow it to be a community legacy, because community is what I'm all about. That's my dream, to be living in a community, aligned community, which is absolutely allowing this flow.
Fantastic. So everybody watching, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching the recording on Silver Tent TV, watch this space, because there will be some wonderful creations coming out of us, but Vanessa's visions are coming to fruition. And if that interests you too, to be part of an amazing community where we're living life on purpose and creating profound ripples in our universe, then come and play.
Yep, invitation to playground.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for coming this side of the camera. And yeah, it's been brilliant to talk to you, and I've learned so much more about you already. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Love to everybody.